Hey, it's Katie again,
And Desi?
and this is episode 2 of our podcast. And I just want to start out by saying that we had a lot of I felt we felt that there were some things that we wanted to definitely expand on, but so we used AI to like do a summary, which is just freaking amazing that there's technology like that. And we used Claude.ai, and Claude gave us a summary. And
And it would definitely be hours more of work without this these new AI innovations.
oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm tempted to kind of just go through the list that Claude suggested, but right, actually, like I think the night after we recorded our first podcast, I talked in the first podcast a lot about my lucid dream type experiences, which, that's sort of a loose term because I don't even know what they really were. Just visions while extremely tired and on the sort of sleep, but kind of awake. Um, and that night, I actually had some pretty wild experiences. Um, and then I had some wild experiences like a few days later. And I don't know that I told you. Did I tell you about those, Desi?
No, it's
So,
here.
so in the first episode, I talked about like a purple kind of glow that I would experience after, you know, doing Monroe Inst- uh, Institute meditation. It kind of began after that, and being able to kind of astral project into sometimes realistic looking scenes and sometimes cartoon like scenes. And usually cartoon like scenes, often ridiculous, like abominable cartoon digital snowmen bonking each other on the head is one example. Um, but, I've also experienced feeling like I had an astral body in which I'm so tired that I feel like I'm moving, but I'm not sure if it's actually my body or my astral body. And I felt myself um, being kind of rolled from one side of the bed to the other by something. It didn't feel negative in any way, but it definitely felt like I was letting this force kind of gently, it felt like a rocking, but it kind of rolled me from side to side and threw me, not threw me, but like kind of held me like with my head hanging over the side of the bed.
Okay.
And
They, I have heard that like when you um astral project and even when you begin to learn to lucid dream,
mm,
that some people actually it's apparently very common, which I'm fortunate to never have experienced to have some form of sleep paralysis right
yeah,
before. And it kind of sounds like that, but I'm not sure
yeah.
because I've never experienced that.
Well, the thing is, it didn't feel bad. Like I've heard some creepy things about
Yeah, that's
sleep
true.
paralysis, and it felt sort of interesting. Like, whoa, what the heck is, this is weird. But it felt kind of like comforting. Um,
Okay.
it was just like I was being gently rocked. I was weird. So that was the first experience. I didn't like see anything. That's probably for the best.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I have, I mean, I just feel like there are going to be some listeners who are going to be like, oh, chalk it all up to that, mental illness. But, um, you know,
You
uh,
can't rule that out, I don't think, right?
yeah, But I've come to believe that I think that mental illness, like of the psychotic kind, I've come to believe that it's of which like I've experienced, um, which is kind of scary to say, like in a public way, but screw it. Like
Yeah.
I is who I is.
Yeah.
Um, and but people. I think that what's going on when people hallucinate visually, which I've never experienced with my eyes open,
Yeah.
except on psychedelics. That's different can of worms.
Yeah.
But I think that I think that there's like, my theory is that there's like a different mode that we're in when we're sleeping, but it's all something of a hallucination. And maybe, when we're awake, it's like a shared hallucination. But I think
Yeah.
that when we're asleep and dreaming, it's the same mechanism being used, but almost like a screensaver. Like if each of us is AI or a computer or something,
Okay.
like dreams are the screensaver. It's like not using the same kind of power. So I think, you know, that's my theory on like what's been happening with me is that, being that I'm someone who is a little bit, more in the spectrum of mixing up the dream and the awake worlds. Um, I just lost my train of thought. I'm tired, but I just think that people who are quote unquote hallucinating, they're having a dream while awake.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would have like a couple of things to say. If you haven't felt like you've hallucinated before, then I don't know. You can't rule it out, but I don't think it would be like likely that you would necessarily start now.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then
No, I
also,
don't. I don't think I would like with my eyes open, but
yeah. And then I've heard some people say, well, I was gonna say also too, like the last episode when you were telling me about it sounded a lot like, honestly, like not to bring up drugs, but when you take DMT, like what those visuals look like reminded me a lot of what you described. Um,
hmm.
but and you can naturally release it, but as
Mm-hmm.
far as I'm aware, you naturally release it when you're born and when you die, and
Mm-hmm.
then certain breathing techniques you can release it with.
Yeah.
But I know that those are like strenuous over kind of a period of time, at least as far as I'm aware. So
Yeah.
I don't think that would be it either. But it just reminded me a lot of it. And then I also was going to see what your take was. I've heard some people describe dreams as um, a parallel universe, like a parallel reality of ours,
Mm-hmm.
and that it could possibly be us experiencing our lives in kind of like an alternate dimension or a parallel reality. And I was going to see what you thought of that
Yeah.
because you got
I think it is not that. I mean, maybe yes, in the sense that, like, well, if our lives are sort of a hallucination of sorts, like, yeah, I guess the dream could be too, but my dreams are so ridiculous. They're just ridiculous. I mean, there's nothing more real about this so called reality
yeah.
than my dreams, except for the content. Like, the content of my dreams is like silly and creepy and just not real. It's like real life, so called, is a lot more like sensible in a way. you
Yeah.
know? But that's the only difference. So no, I don't think it's like another life, because another life would be sensible too. Um,
Yeah.
but what's wild is that I've seen dreams look fully digital.
That's crazy. I've never experienced that. I've also never, I don't want to say I've never heard of it, but it is true. I've never heard of anyone experiencing that, but it
Yeah.
does fascinate me.
Yeah, I mean, I was out to dinner with a friend last night who's a computer scientist, and I really I wanted to mention at the beginning of the episode about AI, because I'm sort of trying to, I'm certainly a layperson, but I'm trying to know a little bit about it, because I really think that um, there's something to be said about, the nature of reality. I mean, it's so cliche, like simulation theory. It's sort of
Hmm.
annoying. Um, because I don't think it's like a man-made computer, you know. I don't think it's but I think there's something in the my dreams have clued me in. I feel that there's something in the way this is all built that is but isn't a very, very infinitely sophisticated computer.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I mean, I definitely believe that um, we live in somewhat of a simulation and a matrix, so to speak. But
Yeah.
I forgot what I was going to say. I was
Yeah.
gonna.
It's kind of we're pushing through this episode because we really wanted to get another one done, but it's a little late. But
Well, I had some good points, but sometimes I don't like to interrupt people, because it's rude.
oh, I'm
But
sorry.
then, no, no, it's my fault. And then I'll have to meditate more because I know it helps with
Yeah.
um, like the flow of neural pathways, which is kind of. But wait, so you believe in simulation theory or you don't?
Yes and no. I do believe in it, but not in the way I feel like. I mean, I haven't read that much about it, just like the, catchphrase and
Yeah,
but I do think that it's a simulation, but not like an actual computer simulation.
yeah,
I don't think there's some sophisticated alien somewhere going like, "Hey, this is a fun, not or not so fun maybe game." But I do think it's, my real belief, which may be too you know, sudden to just blurt out, but my real belief is that God, whatever God is, some
yeah,
the ultimate consciousness is
yeah.
is what I believe. The ultimate consciousness, the real consciousness, the true us is, using us all as avatars to play a game with itself.
That's very interesting. I actually could see that.
Yeah.
Um, it's that even makes sense when some people say that God is in all of us.
Yeah.
Like that it's in matter in each
Yeah.
one of us.
Yeah.
That actually would make a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Um, Even if you were to include reincarnation in that too. Um, yeah, learning lessons from all different aspects, of people's individual lives, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know about reincarnation, because it's my belief that if God, or God is a tricky word, but because of all the different ideas that preconceived notions, but
yeah,
if the ultimate power and consciousness force, is kind of playing a game with itself for its own entertainment, to feel like it's, together, you know all together, not alone. um then it's just one soul.
Well, I never in my entire life would used to believe in reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason I started giving merit to it is when I started reading and listening, seeing all the reports of little kids, like kids below the age of like 5,
Yeah.
and talking about their talking about basically like what you would just call a past life.
Yeah.
And obviously the children didn't know that that would what it'd be called, but they would describe like being shot, or like how they like their current mommy more than their old one, or how they chose, like that's, how they used to just basically describing like all different circumstances of, and in some situations in fact like in several you can definitely find tons of evidence of it online. The mother would look up the person that the child was talking about, and they were a real person who, really died of a gunshot wound to the head or whatever in 18 blah blah blah.
Right.
And the mother knew to look it up based on like the clothing and the name, and then the circumstances of the death. And so, that's pretty much why I gave it.
I think like my theory would also like work with that, because if we're all like reincarnated of each other, or maybe not, like maybe there are like strings of souls that go together, who knows. But I do think that at the end of the day, it's just one of us at the end of the day.
This is like a wild idea, but maybe you experience like life on different ascension levels,
Mm-hmm.
until you're like fully formed, until the God level where you can reach like nirvana in a sense. Like maybe you experience like life with your soul in different in different lives until you learn enough lessons to be like almost like a whole like that the whole text of God, I guess.
Yeah. Like all knowing.
That makes sense. Yeah. And almost like if you need to learn the lessons from different perspectives, and maybe the way you do that is from different lives.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a theory.
But then, nirvana, it's like in that show, The Good Place, which honestly, I'd never watched the whole series. Did you?
I've never seen The Good Place.
Oh, have you heard of it?
Yeah, I've heard. I've heard of the name. I don't actually know what it's about though.
Well, it's basically, it's a comedy, but it's deep, because it's like, there's a lot to it, but this group of people like dies and is in heaven, but then it turns out that it's like really hell, and they're forever like trying to get to the good place, heaven. And when they finally do, they are, after like eons, just getting everything they want and having no problems, they're so bored out of their minds that they want to cease to exist. And
okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah, so
I could see that, because I have for some reason kind of like felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even really tell you why, but that like almost like the frequency here on Earth is like very thick to like learn your lessons, and that you don't remember them. But as you elevate and you reach higher frequencies, like you remember all of those things easily. And so with that knowing, although I don't know that you would be bored, because what I will say that like, not to bring up DMT or my near death experience, but with both of those, like especially with my near death experience, the energy was so overwhelming. you couldn't handle it like as a human.
Mm.
So and I have heard people there's a form of DMT you can take that's called what is it called? And it's 5 times stronger than DMT, and it comes from a frog, like a toad.
Oh yeah, you lick it or something?
Yeah, you can. I know you can smoke it, like vaporize it.
Mm-hmm.
But people consider it. It might be called 5-MeO DMT. I think that is what it's called.
Mm.
It is called 5-MeO DMT. But people like really people. Some people swear by it for healing,
Mm-hmm.
but some people really caution against it because it's very, very overwhelming, the energy, and the
Mm.
way that they describe it kind of reminds me of my near-death experience, like the overwhelming sense of like love and joy and knowledge and information that you learn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but but some people really warn against it because um, it's like it can just be too much for people to handle.
Mm.
Yeah.
Don't want to like get into anything sexual, but is it kind of like an overwhelming, you know?
Orgasm, yeah,
Yeah,
it's like if it's almost like if you were orgasming all day long for 24 hours a day.
that
In
doesn't sound good though.
Right, you would feel overwhelmed by it
Yeah,
because it's almost not meant for your human body.
but when you are on like that level, you can experience that level, and
You can experience it and understand it, and like for me, I was depressed afterwards because I wanted to go back to there.
yeah.
Yeah, I understood that it was so overwhelming. I couldn't keep that existence in my human form.
Whoa.
But I long for the day that I'll experience it again.
Wow. But
Yeah.
I mean like I don't know, I have this sort of like dramatic theory in my head that I really have no idea if there's any truth to it, but just like, oh, well, maybe God, us, is in like ecstasy, but is alone. So it's like, okay, that's amazing to be like in ecstasy, but like without anybody to share it with, there could be a certain like sadness to it too. But
Yeah.
maybe that's not what you're, saying at all. But then my theory swings the other way, which is like, well, okay, so maybe even though there's a lot of, horror and sadness and suffering, in this realm, like at least not kind of, at least we're together experiencing it. And so
Yeah,
yeah.
that's pretty true. That's actually like what Buddhism pretty much says is that this life isn't meant to be easy. It's a life of suffering, and that if we learn our lessons, that we can go like into the next realm, like that we can go into the next realm. But if we don't, then we have to keep experiencing those lessons in different forms of basically reincarnation until we learn them, and that we can't ascend up higher until we learn those lessons. And who knows, maybe that's why that energy felt so overwhelming, because I haven't learned enough lessons to be able to be in that realm, and I got a glimpse of it, but maybe like maybe I have a lot more learning to do, and I don't know if
Yeah.
that makes like the I don't know, like, about when you say that you feel God is alone. Like, I don't really know what my stance on that is, because like when I had a near death experience, it didn't feel that way at all. It 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 felt like like the word alone or lonely or single doesn't exist in that world.
Whoa.
It's an feeling of love and acceptance. and
Mm-hmm.
like peacefulness, which
Mm.
to me doesn't doesn't consist of being alone. And like it's not only to me, like it's what I was it's like when I say to me, like it was like communicated to me
Mm.
that way.
Wow.
You know. Um and but
That's
but
very
like
comforting to hear.
yeah, yeah, and I experienced it like everything was like almost like a light, but everything was instantaneous.
Mm.
So like people were in a light, the form of like almost like a globe of like white light
Mm.
that it's like rainbow lights, and you could sense that energy was I don't know if it was other people, I don't know if it was angels,
Mm.
um I don't know, but it was definitely another the same energy, like similar to energy to myself, but the communication was instantaneous.
Mm.
So you could see these other lights, and like let's call them an angel for lack of better understanding.
Yeah.
Um, you could hear, see, feel, and understand the thoughts of those instantaneously,
Wow.
and it kind of brought me back into like the whole concept of like in physics and um, the quantum physics, the multiverse. There's still always like the room for Omni, like they call it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they call it Omni, which is like the same, which is what they refer to like as God,
Yeah.
and still exist in all of those formats.
Uh,
Um,
all, all of which formats? I got
like
distracted for a
quant-
sec.
quantum physics and the kind of physics, like
Yeah.
when you talk about like the multiverse and
Yeah.
parallel universes, there's still always the omni like aspects,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is religious people would call that God,
Right.
and quantum physicists would call it like omni.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I got a little distracted when you talked about the like white orbs
mm-hmm.
because but I do want to go back to the omni factor because that's fascinating. But I just want to like tell this little story that the very first and one of the only like visual spiritual supernatural experiences I had was so I used to go to this like underground sort of DIY semi or actually illegal music venue called Market Hotel, and I was having a really rough time psychologically for years, and there were times that I would just go to a ton of concerts in venues like this or that venue, and there were times that I would kind of disappear to like either be in a psych ward or I just really wasn't well and really didn't want to be here. And there was one night that it had this was in like 2011, I think, when I had disappeared for a while, but there was this amazing band called Prince Rama that was doing a record release on the roof of Market
Yeah.
Hotel. Oh, you remember this story?
No, I just remember. I just forgot about
Prince
that
Rama?
artist. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So they did like a balloon release, a multicolored balloon release, and just beautiful, like, it was just a beautiful event. And later on that night, you know, there were, we all saw, there must have been, I don't know, there must have been, I'm not, look, I was really high at the time, not gonna lie. I was high and drunk. So it's hard for me to say how many of us were on the roof, but all of us saw there were glowing orbs that just like were kind of dancing with each other across the sky. And
Yeah.
I was really high, so part of me is like, was it the balloons? But like, no. the balloons were hours later, the, the balloons had all been tied together. Like these were not, and they were all white. Like would the balloons have been glowing white? I mean, I, it, some people were like, "Oh, it's nothing," but you don't see like glowing orbs dancing with each other like across the sky. It was just,
No, yeah.
and there's one picture of it that it existed, but it was like, they just look like stars in the picture. Um, but
I was
the interesting thing is that, one of the musicians in the band, like actually the front woman, Tarika, and I are going to be recording an album, or writing an album, I should say, upstate in 2 weeks. And she, everything comes full circle.
wow, that's crazy.
It
That's
is
wild.
crazy. It is crazy. So I was just sort of drifting off for a second, thinking about glowing orbs, but it really meant a lot to me that that happened, because I needed so, you know, nothing supernatural had ever happened to me before, and I had really wanted to get out of here, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so like just seeing that there was something was just unbelievable, and it was a great night. I was so miserable at the time, but even so, like it was still a beautiful night. I could appreciate that. Um but anyway, the Omni thing, um how does it work? Like why do scientists need to factor that in?
Well, I guess so. I'll just say like that I will get into this deeper on another episode when I have done my full review of it, because I haven't really reviewed this subject in a little while, and I get nervous about giving false information. But
Okay.
so I guess I probably should have thought about that before I brought it up. But
Yeah.
so basically, like I mean, just go off of what I remember is in let's see, it's like it's part of like omnipotence, and no, the omnipresence. Like
Mhm.
it doesn't work, or basically like quantum physics
Mhm.
and physics doesn't work without the omnipresence that religion would call God and
Mhm.
physics would call the omnipresence, or just the omnipotence, and especially the OMNI factor
Mhm.
with whatever you want to put on the end of it, whether it's omnipresence, omnipotence. So the math like doesn't work out, and the
Mhm.
science doesn't work out, and quantum physics. A lot of quantum physicists like say that that's why certain parts of regular physics um, don't fully add up, is because they don't factor that in.
Mhm.
And
Oh.
it is true. There are parts of like thermodynamics and your regular classic physics that don't fully work out like mathematically.
Hmm.
And when certain scientists have tried to bring up like that factor, they've been kind of ridiculed because it doesn't fit into like some of the literature
Hmm.
that they'd have to rewrite the textbook, and instead of doing that, it's easier to just kind of but the but you know um but basically like a lot of the quantum physics is working out mathematically and is proving that those certain elements of classical physics
Mhm.
wrong because of that. So you know they they will have to change that up at some point. But yeah, it's basically just like you could call it the God factor. It's just it's it's just it's just in like in every it's just like it works out occasionally when they factor that in.
And does that have to do with, I mean, I know very little
It,
about quantum physics. It has to do with like the observer role or in
yes,
quantum physics. Yeah, like could you explain
exactly.
that a little more?
Yeah, so it basically just says that like in all of these equations that we work out, that there's always an observer role, and that in fact when they use that observer role, a lot of the math that they couldn't figure out actually does work out, and it makes everything come together as a whole. And the observe it's basically like there's always an observer role, and there's like an omni, there's a God role to all of it, and it basically ties religion into science, and it kind of our spirituality into science, and it basically is like when science has basically progressed to the point of finally tying in religion or spirituality, however you want to word that. Whereas it hasn't for a long time, and it kind of wasn't really progressing because of that. And I shouldn't say because of that, but you know, once they added in the like omni factor, everything's coming together. So it really kind of did tie in God with science.
I mean, quantum physics was the first thing that really, I mean, just the little I heard of it years ago, quantum physics was the first thing that ever really kind of cued me in to the idea of God, like long before other things like made me sure of it. And like there was this movie, What the Bleep Do We Know? Did you ever see that movie?
Yeah, that's great.
It was a great one. I was obsessed with it years ago, but it still didn't really like seal the deal for me. It just sort of was fascinating. But I mean, when people say, "Oh, like science versus religion," I'm like, "What are you talking about? They're completely complementary." Or I don't know about religion per se, but you know, if anything, like science. I mean, I didn't hear about the Omni thing until you told me recently, but if anything, like science proves God and, you know, just could never probably catch up to like the full understanding because it's endless. Or who knows? Who knows? Maybe it could catch up.
Well, I think that like it basically like your like classical sciences weren't. Yeah, it kind of is like the missing piece to the puzzle.
Yeah.
And
well, I also have heard of you know, there's like quantum. What is the theory? There's like the theory of everything that scientists are always trying to figure out.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that's like the quantum theories and the, you know, what is it? Oh, my language, you know, the regular scale theories like don't match up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm like rusty on when you say the theory of everything. I think of the movie with about
yeah with what's his name? Stephen Hawking. Yeah, Stephen Hawking. Yeah. It's supposed to be a good movie. I haven't seen it.
It is a good movie. I saw it like I think it was back when it came out. I saw it. It was a long time ago, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's a great.
I should see it. Love story and science. What more could you want? And like, overcoming challenges. What more could you
Yeah,
want?
I know.
Yeah, but
Absolutely.
uh oh, but I had a theory recently.
Well, the like
Yeah,
Einstein theory, like when you talk about like the theory of everything, Einstein, he knew that in his that he knew when he did E=mc²,
yeah,
and his
right.
his 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 things that he came up with,
Yeah,
he knew that there was a missing factor.
yeah,
I think that's what you mean when you're talking about the theory of everything, and that
yeah.
missing factor is quantum physics and the Omni particle. And once you factor in quantum physics, it all actually does work out
Hmm.
mathematically to form like his theories that had missing parts to it.
Mm-hmm.
Quantum physics fills in those parts.
Hmm.
So
I didn't
I'm not.
realize that because I thought they were still looking for the theory. I thought the Einstein's theory of relativity, which relates to larger bodies and
Yeah,
and quantum physics,
yeah.
conflicted, and
They, yeah, they do.
I don't know in what way.
So yeah, like I said, I'm gonna have to review all this,
Yeah, yeah.
but
We'll save it for
I,
another episode.
I doesn't factor in like um what they're calling like dark matter now, which is
Yeah,
the majority of the universe.
yeah. Oh yeah,
And
yeah. What the heck is that?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah. So his his like
Theory.
yeah, so the theory of everything is like the universal rule of physics, and
Yeah.
Einstein's equations only really fact like
Account for the big stuff, right?
no, they only account for um like they used to describe it as like all fundamental forces, but it's not really. It's like only a relationship between um it's kind of the relation. It's kind of like how
Gravitational bodies.
yeah, yeah. But the majority of the universe doesn't actually work on that. The majority
Hmm.
of the universe works with like dark matter and vibrations,
Yeah.
um, and that all is quantum physics.
Yeah.
And that like Nikola Tesla
Hmm.
um, knew a lot about that, and that's pretty much like how he just figured out free energy.
Mm. What?
And
I don't know any. I don't know anything about free energy.
free energy is like lighting up a light bulb without plugging it, without free energy is like is like harnessing. Okay, these are deep subjects you're getting into. Okay, free energy is when um, you use like a small device, and it gives unlimited energy. So you can use like a device that's the size of like 2 feet by 3 feet.
Hmm.
And you can give unlimited energy from it. You could eventually light up a whole city from it.
It's mind-blowing and really annoying to hear this because like what are we doing with, drilling into the earth using gasoline for if this technology exists?
Because okay, so and I will bring this up. Maybe I'll do this. Maybe we'll do the next episode on this, because this is something that I actually do know a lot about, but
Hmm.
I would want to I'd want to bring in the right documents and evidence and describe it to people like in a chronological way.
Yeah.
But I'll give like a short summary.
Yeah.
Reason why that doesn't exist is every person in history who has done that has been unalived conveniently. And a big part of that is, so when Nikola Tesla had lit up a light bulb at the World's Fair without
wires,
he had it in and it was lit without seemingly any other way. That was, he was using free energy, and JP was it JP Morgan?
Yeah.
Or was it was JP Morgan the one that funded Nikola Tesla?
I don't know. I just know JP
Okay,
Morgan.
So it was one of the big wigs that was funding him, like, and it wasn't JP Morgan, it was like the steel, the person that did like owned all the steel in the United States. Let me just
rich guy, just some rich guy. Yeah. We don't even.
Yeah, so we'll say that
rich guy.
So he told Nikola Tesla, when Nikola Tesla said that, showed what he figured out. He said, "Well, how will I make any money? Like, we can't do this. I won't make any money off of it." And he defunded Nikola Tesla's project because of it. And so that's kind of an insight as to why you can't do that. And every person in history has been unalived because of it.
Oh my God.
The United States, is it the Department of, and like I said, I'll bring all this like better into, I'll get all this better organized, and I'll tell people in their next episode.
Yeah.
But the United States, one of the major departments, I'm going to say like the Department of Defense, or something like that, has it in their, has it in the, anything that gives like more than 20% of energy reductions, is immediately gets contracted to the United States, so it can't be for public use. It gets contracted into like the Department of Defense, into like DARPA, and it becomes a part of, basically becomes like classified government information. And so anybody who tries to have a patent for it, you can't patent it unless you want to disappear. And that's, pretty much like a very, very short description of it.
So anything that, so like some faction of the government, whatever it is, has like decreed or whatever.
Yes.
That anything that reduces, say that again. Anything that reduces, like, meaning that anything that uses 20% less like fuel, or I don't get it totally.
Is energy in general. So okay, so if you come up with a solar panel that gives better energy, like 20% better, you can't come out with it unless like you basically can't come out with it because you would need to patent it, and they will take the patent.
Oh my gosh.
And worse is they'll usually take your life as well.
Yeah. Wow.
Because so let's put it this way. The person who came up with the carburetor that didn't require fuel, and they went across the United States on 5 miles of fuel, they disappeared. The person that, like, solar panels, the ones that we use today, they came out with those in 1980.
Yeah.
So if they were actually allowing people to update that, we would have way better. So solar panels, fuel. There's a guy that came up with a car that runs on water.
Mm-hmm.
He disappeared. So those are
Oh
all
my
just
God.
sources. There's several different like scientists who came up with ways to light up their house and unlimited energy, so it could continue producing energy, so they could light up the whole block if they wanted to.
Yeah.
All of these people disappeared.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
But it really makes you like, here we are.
those contracts, and they say that it's national security. It's written either into the Constitution. It's written into like some form of our government, that it's a threat to national security, and um, and that's their reasoning as to why it can't be publicly available, and why it has to be a part of the Department of Defense or
Because too
whatever.
much money is made off the fossil fuel industry.
Right, and the fossil fuel industry um, is they just like I was mentioning in J.P. Morgan, they lobby the government.
Yeah.
So when you lobby the government, like, you kind of own the government, and it's owned by fossil fuels and pharmaceuticals. And
Yeah.
so when you pay the government in turn makes laws for you.
Right.
And they incrementally make people's lives better, when in reality we could all be living in a utopia, but they believe, the powers that be believe that scarcity is how they hold their power.
Right. Right.
So they put everybody into scarcity when they don't need to be doing that, but that's how they choose to do it. The first like anti-gravity things, which is what people would call UFOs, they had that technology in 1930, and you can look up old ads.
Yeah.
That show from the 50s how they were advertising that pretty soon we'll all be the Jetsons and flying around, because the anti-gravity technology was already out.
Wow.
And then all of that disappeared by like the mid 1950s. By the 1960s, you won't be able to find any old ads from that. You only find it from like 1950s. And that's because the government, I think it was right around then that they made that part of the law that that it's a national security threat to make that type of stuff public, and that it needs to be part of our Department of Defense and whatever different government departments.
Yeah. Well, it's I think a lot, as you know, about the climate crisis, and I've had, speaking of dreams, I've had a lot of nightmares, like, you know, really terrifying, with what, could be. I don't want to say is, because it's a little too terrifying to say, but what could be coming. I mean, I'm not foolish, but the Omni factor, this is essentially, you know, a, a podcast more or less about, you know, spirituality and like all things kind of in weird and not all things in weird ways connected to it. And it's like, what's God like thinking, man? And that I think, that's another. I have some theories on that too. It's the yin yang. But in a nutshell, is is my guess. There has to be, it things have to be shaken up in a terrifying and horrific way in this world for some essential reason that is a little difficult to understand, or very difficult to understand.
Yeah. I know. I think about that from like multiple angles. Like sometimes I wonder, like, are the that be, or the people in those 1% positions, like, are they really that like stupid, or are they just
Yeah.
going to push us right to the edge?
Yeah.
Or like I said, are they really that dumb, and they're just so power hungry that they'll put us into, totality where there's just like no return point,
Yeah.
and maybe governments will collapse at that point. Who knows?
Yeah.
Or like, what is the plan? Because you can build all the like nuclear bunkers, and because like
Right.
right now, such a trend that a lot of elites are building bunkers, and it's like, okay, well, where do you all plan on going if there's nothing to return to?
Right. Right. So, but at the same time, like, God, I believe it is in charge, or ultimately.
Yeah.
And I think, there must be some sort of fucked up but essential reason, or I don't know. I mean, that's sort of horrible
Well,
to say.
one thing I do know, I don't know if there's a plan, but one thing I do know is there's never a reason to fear, because we are all protected by God,
Yeah.
and whatever happens, as long as your intentions are pure and your heart is pure,
Mm.
if you're going in the right place, because I did experience that. Like I said, and I will tell people that on
Yeah.
a podcast, probably the sooner the better, in
Yeah.
full, my near death experience. And just a
Yeah.
quick thing of like that, a near death experience is when your heart has stopped, and so you technically pronounced dead,
Hmm.
and but you are revived, and it's if you experience anything after that point, it's what you experienced.
Yeah. 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 But I just want to clarify, like, or, I do think, I do think there's definitely some truth to that. Like, if you act out of a pure heart, like, things are more likely going your way, you know?
Yeah.
But I also don't think it's entirely like, I don't think it could really be that simple either, because, um, there are like children who terrible things happen to, and you just, I think it's part of the equation, but I don't think it's the full equation. And also, like, there are people who are tortured, like, are they protected by God? But I think you might mean it in a different
I
sense.
you're on Yeah, I mean that your soul will be protected.
Right.
I can't.
Yeah.
I fortunately, here on Earth, that I can't. I don't know why they're suffering. I don't.
Yeah.
You know,
Of that
Buddhist,
level. Yeah.
and when I say that you'll be protected, I don't mean like here on Earth from any wrongdoing.
Yeah.
That like your soul is eternal, and your soul will be protected
Yeah.
based on what I experienced afterlife.
Right.
But I think it's the things that we do. I think that we can't control what happens to us and who does what, but we can control ourselves and how we react to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's important not to let fear get the best of you, because
Yeah.
you operate at a lower vibration when there's fear, and that's why the news is full of fear and fear mongering, and the government would rather have everyone argue with each other and fear things, because you operate on a low vibration level with
Yeah.
that, and negativity brings negativity, and positive attracts positivity.
Yeah.
So,
I do, yeah. I sometimes, yeah, the only thing we can control is ourselves. Sometimes I don't feel that in control of my
no,
own
I,
self
no,
either.
I can get lessons much better than I can take them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I,
No, but I
um,
think it's true. We do have to, like, move to love. But, when I look at some of the decisions I made in the past out of fear that were huge mistakes, massive mistakes, life changingly bad mistakes, when I
mhm.
remember the feeling of what it was like at that time, I still, even in retrospect, being like, oh my gosh, I could have like saved lives, if not for like, I could have more better been there for people had I not been too afraid and along those
Yeah.
lines. you know um when I look back at the fear, like I remember it, I don't know that I could have done any differently, as much as I'm like horrified to say that. I just was so afraid, and I don't know what could have overridden that, even though I've hopefully learned my lesson now.
Well, that's like all you can do, like, because also too, like when we say things, like I feel like the human brain likes to think of things in black or white, like fear or no fear,
Yeah.
or wrong, but it's a spectrum, like, and like you try to do the best you can do, and like that's hopefully good enough, but it's not like just because it's not like one makes the other untrue. Like you can be in fear and try to make the decision that you could have for how afraid you were.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense. Like, you know what I mean? Like both things can be true, and everything is always like in grays. Like everything's in spectrums, So it's not like,
Yeah. Absolute truths of
yeah,
anything.
yeah.
But Des, we're at an hour,
Okay.
and I think it's been a very interesting episode, and I think we can leave it there.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Till then.